Will the distinguished sponsor, the chairman of the Committee on Finance, yield to some clarificatory questions in relation to the bicameral conference report, Mr. President?
Most willingly, Your Honor, to the Senate Committee Chair on National Defense and the Vice Chair also of the Finance Committee, the gentleman from Cavite, Mr. President.
Thank you. At the outset, Mr. President, let me state for the record that I'm not questioning the collegial nature of our plenary deliberations and most of all our decisions, on all matters of national interest, the national budget included. No, just to be clear where I'm coming from, and this is water under the bridge, and it will only be good for future reference. Last November 26, we approved on third reading, in fact, second and third readings, the Senate version of the budget. And since the sponsor discussed only the summary of the amendments and movements of appropriations from the General Appropriations Bill or the House version to the Senate version, I kept on asking for the details of the Senate version, Mr. President. And last December 1, the first organizational meeting of the bicameral conference was convened. Again, I reiterated my request to LBRMO to provide us with the details of the Senate version with the end in view of, participating more efficiently in the bicameral conference, because without the details of the Senate version, how could I even participate? Because what we had at the time was only the summary, as I mentioned earlier. Now, we were given a copy because the bicameral conference would have started at 9 o'clock, and I was presiding over a committee hearing with the Senate President at 10 o'clock. So at 10 o'clock or thereabouts, we were able to receive a copy of the details of the Senate version. Having said that, Mr. President, I will proceed to ask my questions. First, on the DPWH budget, we noted in the bicameral conference report an increase of 83.87 billion and a decrease of 55.521 billion, or a net change or increase in the DPWH budget from 666.474 billion to 694.822 billion pesos, Mr. President. Now, considering the underspending record of the agency along with the DOTR, my question is, what is the logic in further increasing the budget of the agency in 2021, considering the challenges brought about by the pandemic? Now, just for the record, Mr. President, the average unused appropriations of the DPWH, ito yung detailed unused appropriations, from 2011 to 2018. 86 billion, 43 billion, 25 billion, so forth and so on. Ang average po ng underspending or unused appropriations of the agency over the years mentioned is 81.9 billion pesos. Now, according to the Statement of Allotment, Obligations, Disbursement, and Balances, or SAOB, the disbursement rate of the said agency is at a pitiful 37.8%. Now, from 667.47 billion as recommended or as proposed under the NEP, and then after the bicam report, we increase it further to 694 billion. So I go back to my previous question. What is the logic of further increasing the budget of the agency with such a low utilization record, Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished gentleman from Cavite. Your Honor, the DPWH, you're right, if you measure it on a one-year basis, does not have a great disbursement record. But they point out that sometimes that disbursement record is affected also by factors extraneous to the department. Like, for example, the DepEd for classrooms, the releases sometimes are late in the year and the budget goes through first it's released to DepEd, then released to the DPWH. So, and sometimes they have to identify the land. There is a problem with identification, but they are quick to point out, and they support it with figures, is that on a 2-year horizon, the disbursement and obligation figures of the DPWH are much better, Your Honor. So that's also, I remember, I think His Honor and some other colleagues of ours mentioned that during the interpellations in the plenary. And but DPWH was quick to point out that if you look at the 2-year horizon, it is a much better horizon in terms of completion of projects. And I would probably add also, Your Honor, secondly, because of, well, 2020 was, I think we can all agree, was not a normal year. And we, even from the point of view of the budget, first we had the for later release, or the FLR issue, which was further complicated by the numerous quarantines and lockdowns that we had. And back in March or April, we passed the first Bayanihan law. And then sometime September, October, we passed the second Bayanihan law, where a lot of the resources, I think, that were intended originally under the 2020 GAA, or General Appropriations Act, to be meant for the budget of the DPWH. I think hundreds of millions were hiniram po ng national government to meet more urgent programs like the SAP, or the Social Amelioration Program, that was close to 200 billion pesos, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why naghahabol tayo in terms of infrastructure, Mr. President. That's why I think for 2021, we have carried over 135 billion pesos worth of projects. Pag tinanggal mo yon, so siguro ang pinag-uusapan lang dyan is about 500 billion plus, Your Honor. So I think that's why hinahabol kasi yung 2020 infrastructure dito sa 2021 budget. So I think those are some of the reasons why there is that budget there for DPWH, Your Honor.
My reference, Mr. President, is not just a 1-year or 2-year disbursement record rate, or disbursement rate record. It actually spans a period of 4 years: 2016, 73.2%, 2017, 36.3%, 2018, 42.6%, and 2019, 56.4%. And even if the project is covered by MICA, before it was named Mayowa, ganun pa rin, masyadong mababa yung disbursement versus obligation rate. And if we refer back to the unused appropriations, as I mentioned, in terms of yung nominal value nila, nasa mga 82 billion pesos ang average from 2011 to 2019. So I'm just asking for the wisdom behind increasing further, as it is at 666.47 billion pesos as proposed under the NEP. We could actually, based on the historical data that I presented or I mentioned, makikita natin kaagad na nasa mga at least 82 billion pesos ang di magagamit. And here we are, further increasing the budget of DPWH by 28 billion. So I'm just putting that into the record para malaman natin, and probably next year, again, when we go back in plenary and question, or even in the committee hearings, ito na naman yung ating issue. So it's been a vicious cycle, Mr. President. So that's why I'm asking that question. So for future use, for future reference, medyo we should learn our lesson from this data, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor. That's well taken. The point of His Honor is very well.
I was thinking because I recommended a reduction of, I think, 60 billion pesos from the budget of DPWH. Sa halip na mabawasan, because I raised so many issues, ROW, for example, under the 2020 GAA, meron silang 11.4 billion. On top of that, meron pa silang embedded ROW appropriations, meaning embedded in the projects, of 5.7 billion. So that makes up for what? 17 billion. Ano? And in the proposed 2021 budget, they were asking under the NEP for 22.14 billion. And again, we found out na meron pa ring embedded na 4.05 billion pesos. So 22 plus 4, that's 26 billion pesos in ROW appropriations. On top of the 17 billion pesos
6 plus embedded.
sa 2020 budget na hindi naman nila magamit. So we recommended for the reduction from the budget of the DPWH at least do sa ROW, sa right of way. So my question is, how much, because under the Senate version, I understand that you reduce it by 14 billion, ang naiwanan 7 billion. And that's good.
7.
And I was happy to note that under the Senate version, we actually reduced or deducted 14 billion pesos from the ROW appropriations under the DPWH. But after the bicam, mukhang tumas pa yung ROW, Mr. President.
No, Your Honor, it's around 6 or 7 still. So, opo.
So the Senate version has been adopted.
For right of way, opo.
Thank you for that information. Now, those multi-purpose buildings, again, this is another issue that I raised. Ano? And there are 793 line items with a uniform 1 million each appropriation or appropriated for 793 items. And I remember that you conferred with no less than the Secretary of DPWH, and I heard your remark to the effect that if it's less than 2 million pesos, pag sa multipurpose building, it is not viable, it's not implementable. So what happens to the 793 line items with uniform 1 million peso appropriations each, Mr. President? Is it still there, or was it...
They are still there, but with the continuation, Your Honor. So maybe your fear of them being skeleton projects will...
Half skeleton, Mr. President. They
will grow some flesh, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Well, third issue, yung DICT, you know. So out of the 14.4 billion, again, I'm thankful that the Senate version increased the 902 originally proposed under the NEP. It was increased under the House version by 2 billion pesos. And under the Senate version, dinagdagan po natin ng 3 billion. So that's good because ang pag-uusapan sa bicam, yung disagreeing provision. So on its face, mukhang walang disagreement between the House and the Senate. Kasi 2 billion yung dinagdag ng House, 3 billion yung dinagdag ng Senate, naging 5.9 billion pesos. So that's good. When I conferred with Secretary Honasan, sabi niya, we can make do with 5.9 billion pesos for their national broadband program. No? Ang sabi niya, excluding regions 1 and 2, makakarating na sila sa Davao from NCR. Ang nangyari sa bicam, ang naiwan na lamang total under the Office of the Secretary, OSEC, or sa budget ng 8.4 billion pesos from the Senate version of 14.4 billion. So how much out of the 8.4 billion pesos left under the DICT OSEC appropriations, ilan na lang yung naiwanan para sa National Broadband Program, Mr. President?
OSEC ang tinatanong. We're getting the figure for the OSEC, Your Honor, but we confirm what you said about but I think at least on balance, we still have a net increase of around 1.5 billion for the DICT. I'm just looking for the breakdown of how much is for broadband, how much is for free Wi-Fi.
No, I'm particularly interested in the National Broadband Program. How much is left of the 5.9 billion? Ilan na lang ngayon sa National Broadband?
Two numbers. The plus. It's around 810. Kasama yan? It's around 956, almost 1 billion pesos, Your Honor.
Ang under the NEP, 902 million pesos. And wala silang magagawa sa 902 million. And
that's on top of the 902, Your Honor.
so 902 plus plus 900.
Opo,
So it's
opo.
now at 1.9 billion pesos.
Thereabouts, Your Honor.
What happened, Mr. President? Because under the House version,
Oh.
nag-increase na ng 2 billion, naging 2.9. Under the Senate version, we further increase it by another 3 billion, naging 5.9. And sabi ko nga, according to the ICT Secretary Honasan, sabi niya okay na yon, excluding regions 1 and 2, the region of Senator Amy and region 2, makakarating sila hanggang Davao
Which one?
from NCR.
Yes, Your Honor.
But now it seems na hanggang Caloocan na lang yan, Mr. President.
Your
O
Honor.
hanggang Valenzuela.
Your Honor.
Kawawa na.
Mas mabilis daw kasi tinanggal daw yung singil sa Valenzuela, Mr. President. But seriously, the House added, as you correctly mentioned, 2 billion. But in the bicam, they decided to withdraw it because they were citing the low utilization rate of 21%, Your Honor. So
Well,
that was what...
What's good for the goose should also be good for the gander, Mr. President.
that's
In-increase
true,
nila
Your Honor.
ng 28 billion yung DPWH
That's true, Your
because
Honor.
of,
Yeah.
and I argue that the same argument, low utilization rate. Now they're using the same argument sa DICT. And I already mentioned during my interpellation, or during my sponsorship of the budget of DICT, na yung matitipid nga natin dito, 34 billion pesos for a period of 5 years. Pag makompleto natin yung National Broadband Program. So what happened?
Yes, Your Honor, I think the gentleman is correct that there are some missed opportunities here and really we could have savings. But I think the problem is really both the Senate and the House really had a hard time sourcing funds as compared to the 2020.
Yeah, because Mr. President, I'll be frank, nadagdagan pa yung multipurpose eh. I will not mention anymore the locations, because I don't want to put some people on the spot. Suffice it to say, na I know where additional funds for multipurpose buildings went to, or are intended to be appropriated. So let's leave it at that, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, that's just about it. And at the proper time, Mr. President, ngayon pa lang, I'm manifesting my dissenting vote on the bicameral conference report for the reasons that I have given during my interpellation. And at the appropriate time, I'm going to explain my vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
to the distinguished Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, the Chair of the Commission on National Defense, and we respect who we hold in very high esteem, and we regret that some of his very good augmentations to the budget may not have been carried in full after the bicameral conference. We really tried, but as I mentioned, the sourcing was very tight for amendments, especially when it came to the bicameral conference, and we'll try better next year, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Mr. President. And make no mistake, Mr. President, I'm thankful to the sponsor, the Senate budget sponsor, for accommodating some of my amendments, and even but I see his position, his situation. It's really very hard to balance, between the House and the Senate. So I understand. On that note, I understand your position, and pagtulungan na lang natin next time, probably.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you,
We
Mr.
give you
President.
that assurance, Your Honor. As if we can fight COVID in 2021, perhaps we can have we can realize our vision, your vision, which I agree with in full, the vision of Secretary Honasan to expand the national broadband. And we thank him for his understanding, and we acknowledge the importance of his amendment, which is why we accepted them, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr.
We recognize first the President Pro Tem, Senator Ralph